Welcome to Comic-Con 2023. How are you guys?
We are excellent.
I'm
here.
Ben Giroux, Lincoln Peirce, Mitch Watson for Big Nate. We are here at Comic-Con. Have you guys been down to the floor at all yet?
I have, yes, all day, a lot for about 5 hours yesterday. Looking
5 hours.
looking for toys to buy. Yeah,
Oh, you're a collectibles guy?
I do. I like collectibles. Yeah.
What's your
Bear Brick are my, which they do not have here, unfortunately. Bear Brick are these weird Japanese toys.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about Big Nate for a little bit. Now, Lincoln, how does it feel to see your story brought to life on the big screen? Or not on the big screen. How does it see? Can I start this again, guys? I am so sorry. How does it feel to see your story brought to life after such a long development process that has evolved from the way that it was originally optioned?
It is tremendous. You know, over the years, we got several offers to do Big Nate as a live action. And I was always a holdout. I never had any interest. You know, he's a cartoon character. I always wanted him to be a cartoon character. And so when we partnered with Nickelodeon and I saw those like early images of Nate and how he was going to look in 3D, because of course I draw him in 2D. So I had just some concerns like, how's he going to look? He looks amazing, you know, the writers are amazing. So yeah, it's been a great experience.
It's incredible. Mitch, what was it about Big Nate that intrigued you?
I mean, part of it was Ramsey Naito, who runs the Nickelodeon animation. She basically called me up and said, I have a book series, and I think the lead character is you, and I want you to come and work on it. And there's probably a lot of truth to that. That was the main thing. What appealed to me most about the character of Big Nate was he was this kid who was sort of insecure. This is how I read him. Insecure, looking for people find his way in the world, for people to like him, and the way he'd chosen to do that was through causing pranks and causing trouble.
That's
you know,
incredible.
And that was how he wanted to be noticed. And she was right; that was very similar to me in school.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Ben, can you talk to me about capturing Nate's voice and what you wanted to bring to the role to make it your own?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of my early conversations with Mitch about the character were, we have a lot of cartoony character voices on the show, but Nate really needs to be the grounded, central voice that the audience can really relate to. And so, honestly, I think I'm probably the most grounded vocal performance on the show, and we have so many just crazy voices that surround me. But yeah, I think the real task was creating a character that is a troublemaker and is mischievous, but is also likable.
Sure.
Where you get to hear in his voice that sort of nuance, as Mitch said, him sort of questioning himself in the midst of all the zany hijinks and misadventures that he gets into.
Now, you talk about being one of the more grounded voices. Can you talk to me about the casting process for Big Nate?
Yeah, you know, it was an interesting and a unique one for me and everybody because we only got one actual casting round in person.
Oh, wow.
And then COVID hit. And we had to do everything else from that point forward for the next 2.5 years from home. And so I only got to meet Ben once. I got to meet Ben, Arnie, Daniel M. K. Cohen, and Bryce Charles, who were the 4 leads. I got to meet them all once in person. Nobody else I got to meet. Nobody else in the cast.
First week of 2020.
The first, yeah.
Whoa.
Sorry, first week of March of 2020. So
Yeah.
the pandemic was just happening.
Yeah, it was so. And then we didn't realize how long it was going to take, and then we all got sent home. And then what we did with the 4 leads was we just started pairing people's voices together to see who would sound the best with each other, so nobody would get in each other's way and stuff like that. And I felt very fortunate because, and Lincoln was involved in this process too, that I got my first pick for all of the casting of all of the leads. These were the guys who I wanted from the get-go, and fortunately, Lincoln and everybody else, all the brass and stuff like that, the executives were all on the same page, and I could not be happier. And to the point now where I can't even listen to the character without hearing his voice. You know, when we do it, I can't hear anybody else doing it.
Well, let me ask you this. What does Ben bring to the role of Big Nate that isn't necessarily on the page?
Well, Ben's actually a good actor.
Thanks, Mitch.
You know? So, I mean, that always helps, I think.
There's the approval you're craving.
Yeah,
Yes.
But no, Ben is a genuinely good actor, but also a very funny person. And what we didn't know when we were casting it was that Ben and Arnie Pantoja, who plays Teddy, and in the books, obviously, Big Nate and Teddy are buddies, and in real life, those two were like best friends and writing partners. And so, at the first audition, I'd asked if everybody was capable of doing improvisation and stuff like that. And so, one of the big things that everybody has brought to it, but especially Ben and Arnie, is the fact that their ability to improvise with each other and ad-lib new lines and stuff like that. And Ben is also very, very good at switching up emotionally and even changing his voice at times, because there's been episodes we've done where he has to jump between different characters that he's voicing, and we're like, do you want us just to do your voice and then we'll come back and we'll do the other character? He's like, no, I can do it. We'll just go back and forth.
Well, do you guys record alone, or how do you capture that chemistry?
Well, that's a great question, and one that I credit everybody at Nickelodeon for figuring out a way for us to record remotely in a pandemic. I think Mitch can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were one of the first shows in the early days of the pandemic to record remotely as an ensemble.
I think we're the only show
that
did it. Yeah.
So, there would be early days in the pandemic where we had 12 actors on a Zoom, and we're trying to figure out not only the technical hurdles of that, but figuring out how to improvise, because to Mitch's point, there is an element of improvisation in our show, and we have a lot of really gifted, funny, comedic actors who excel in improv. And so figuring out how to do that over Zoom with buffering and gaps in between and glitches was a real science, and I think we figured it out.
It's incredible.
Yeah, they didn't tell me, because every show I've ever worked on, I like to do ensemble records so the whole cast can be there, as much of the cast as possible, so they can all play off each other like you would do in a stage play. And no one at Nickelodeon told me that nobody else was doing that, and I was kind of like, well, we need to do it. It's a comedy. We kind of need to do that. And so they kind of just went, all right, go for it. We'll see what happens. And I think the most we ever did was 14, very, very early on. And I was told later that was the most, that's the biggest ensemble record they've ever done, and certainly the only one they ever attempted over Zoom. And then they told me later, yeah, nobody was doing this. Everybody's coming in by themselves and doing it.
That's incredible. Lincoln, what's been the most surprising part about seeing Big Nate brought to life through animation?
Just everything you can do in animation that you can't do on a page.
Sure.
So Big Nate started as a comic strip, and then I did some Big Nate novels. And as much as I love comics, and I do, a newspaper comic strip, you've got 4 panels to tell a story. And so, it is, there are limits there. There are limits to what you can do narratively. There are limits to, what you can draw and have people appreciate it when it's shrunk down to the size of a comic strip in the newspaper.
Right.
And so the most surprising thing for me, and one of the most positives, is that, on the screen, there are almost no limits.
Right.
And, they can have adventures where literally, they go to sea, they go to space, and these are things that, I wouldn't be able to do on the page. And so that has been a huge surprise for me, and something that I think, our writers and our actors are really, really good at, just like, let's keep pushing and see, how much fun we can have.
Can you talk to me about the animation style, and how did you know that was going to be the perfect fit for Big Nate?
Well, so we had an early Zoom meeting in which I met our art director for season 1, David Skelly. And I think David is a genius. And he had what he was calling a lookbook. And in this lookbook, it was just page after page of all these things that were sort of informing how he wanted the cartoon to look.
Right.
And this was, anything from like Rankin Bass Christmas specials to like anime stuff. He was looking at backgrounds of like these obscure, comics that I had never even heard of. And so I said, this guy is putting so much thought and care and attention into how Big Nate is going to look. And yet he was still also looking at my original drawings and saying, how can we create something that is really faithful to the look that Lincoln has sort of created over the years? And I just thought, Big Nate is in good hands. I had a really, really good feeling.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, starting in COVID is challenging enough, but what did you guys learn from the first season that you were able to apply better in the second season?
Mitch?
Well, I mean, and there's a couple different ways to answer that. The first one being that we set out in the very first season to do particular things stylistically. You know, Dave Skelly and I had wanted, one of the first things when we brought Dave on, I said I wanted, Lincoln mentioned Rankin Bass. We wanted it to look as much like stop motion as we possibly could. So the entire show, normal animation is shot on what they call ones. So it's a one frame per movement.
Right.
So it's a fluid look. We shoot the whole show on twos. And we did that on purpose to give it more of a kind of as much of a herky-jerky stop-motion look as we could. We didn't know if that was going to work or not. And then we found out in the course of the first season that it worked. And so going into the second season, we decided to push that even further. The other thing, too, is technology grows so fast that there were things technologically with the characters in terms of their rigging and the way their mouths worked and their eyes and so forth that we just couldn't do. And that suddenly in the second season, we were able to do it. We also had a very short development period in the first season. We didn't have a development period, I should say. The show was, I came on October of 2019 is when I started and met Lincoln and we began discussing it. By December of 2019, we had a greenlit show. So in that period of time, we wrote the Bible and pilot. We went into production, I think, in February of the next year. And Dave and I and everybody, we just sort of jumped. Normally, you have about at least a year of development. We didn't have that. We did most of our development happen over the course of the first season.
Wow.
So by the time we got to the second season, we kind of had everything locked in so we could begin playing more with it. That's why in the second season, you see a lot of more craziness we were able to do, a lot more cut and paste stuff. We brought in who ultimately became our second art director, Sam Koji Hale, who has a stop motion background. So he was able to bring an entire new level of animation to the show, much of which we just didn't have time to do in the first season. So in the second season, what we're seeing is a lot of like, okay, the door is open. Now we can really explore this world every way we want to.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you guys have had some amazing guest stars like Jack Black. Who's your guys' dream person to bring into the show? Start with you, Lincoln. As he looked back.
Good. Think about that. Wow.
Holy
That's a
cow.
good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But there is, there's a character who I'm still hoping that we can sort of like create a little bit more of a role for on the show named School Picture Guy. And so if we can, I'm not quite sure who we would cast as School Picture Guy, but I sort of, in my mind, I always sort of hear him as kind of like this John Lovitz character. so maybe get John Lovitz in there. I'm not sure.
Ben?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. You know, I think our casting team is so good at bringing in such incredible guest stars. What I would say is I'm just celebrating the cast we do have. I am such a fan of the existing crew. You know, we sort of mentioned it earlier, but I had pre-existing friendships with our core cast before we even started the show, totally coincidentally. So Bryce Charles, who plays Dee Dee, Arnie Pantoja, who we talked about, who plays Teddy, and then Daniel M.K. Cohen, who plays Francis. You know, I'm just such a fan of that core group and all of our just universe of actors that we say. So honestly, I don't
You're
really
already
have,
working with him. That's why.
I'm
you're
already working with my dream cast. It's hard to say who I would want to add on to it.
Right. Mitch, you got anybody?
Not real. I mean, no. We've been so fortunate with a lot of the people we have. I mean, coming into the second season, you know, we have Lorraine Newman joins the cast, and she's fantastic and kind of an idol of mine. And you know, her early days with SNL. The way we cast the show is it's sort of on a case-by-case basis, and so we never have been let down by our casting team in terms of who we want. So no, I really don't have anybody. I can't say, and I'm not allowed to talk about things that are coming down the pike. But everybody we have, I think, is fantastic. I'm never dissatisfied with anybody.
Yeah, I don't really hear about the casting sort of like before it happens. And then, so I'll see sort of an early version of an episode. And so when I was watching one, and we have this character named Uncle Pedro, and I was just watching it, and I just said, that's Bubbles from The Wire. That is Bubbles from The Wire. And it was awesome.
Yeah. We ended up getting Andre Arroyo because I went to a party with Michael Rivkin, who plays Mr. Galvin on the show, who's somebody I've known for a very long time. And we were standing in line at the party, and Andre Arroyo was standing behind me. And I turned around and I went, I think you're fantastic on The Wire. And I just was totally fanboying out on him. And we just got to chatting, and then he was like, what are you doing? I go, I work in animation. I do a voice. He goes, hey, man, if there's ever a voice, I'd love to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I literally went, I'm developing something right now. And Uncle Pedro was a character. Lincoln and I have talked about it. There were two characters that I loved from the comic book that I wanted to exploit. One was Chad and one was Uncle Pedro. And I went, oh my God, you'd be perfect for Uncle Pedro. And then we brought him in, and he's fantastic as Uncle Pedro.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So the moral of that story is don't miss out on any parties.
No, yeah.
Is in a voice acting job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us here at the Screen Rant Room for Comic-Con 2023. Enjoy the con. Thank you guys for stopping by.
Thank you.
Thank you.